will open us up in a gratitude. Oh, I'm going to go through some gratitude things. It just feels right from what we're talking about. So let's just take a moment and just really open our hearts to gratitude and feeling grateful. Um, we are grateful for the quiet moments that calm our minds, our bodies, strength to heal and carry us forward. The beauty of starting over, the lessons hidden in every mistake, a warm cup of tea on a chilly morning, the sound of rain against a window, the freedom to choose our own paths, the courage to let go of what no longer serves us, the love that surrounds us in unexpected ways, the sunsets that remind us to pause and breathe, the books that carry us away to another world, the mornings that feel like new beginnings, the laughter shared with those we hold close, the stillness that makes us feel grounded, the unknown and the possibilities it holds, the strength I didn't know I had, and the endings that lead to new beginnings. Amen. Amen.
That was beautiful, Barbara. Thank you. All right, let me get my screen shared here. So, when Doug asked me to present tonight, I didn't have time to throw anything together, so I thought that we could relook at a previous presentation that I did, I think a couple of years ago. And it is on the history of our solar system as told to us according to Ra and Quo of the Confederation. Um, oh, let me see. Looks like someone put in the chat. And so growing up, I always knew that I always felt like there was more life in our solar system. Always felt like Earth, like, we weren't as special as we always claimed to be. And so when I came across the raw contact, came across, when they started speaking about the history of our solar system and the different things that have occurred and how they're affecting us today. My brain just kind of exploded and I just really just kind of went on I guess you can say, knowledge rampage. And I went and searched everything I could find on the history of our solar system. So all of this is a compilation of Raw's materials and quotes, as well as material from the Crow or Confederation channels. Alrighty, so for a overview of our solar system, so there have been 4 planets in our solar system to host third density life. There are currently 2 planets that host life, and there is one potential that Ross says could potentially host third density life in the future, and we'll come back to that later. Our sublogos. In creating our solar system, the sublogos chose the bipedal erect great ape vehicle to invest third density consciousness in. So pretty much every planet that has ever hosted third density life all had some form of bipedal erect ape that was native to their second densities. Here on Earth, that would be the monkey. We are third density vehicles. We evolved from the second density ape, and that would have happened on the other planets that hosted third density life as well. Now, of course, their apes probably didn't look like ours. It would be definitely be native to their environments, but they all had some form of ape that was bipedal and erect and had an opposable thumb. Now, Ra speculates, we don't know for sure, but Ra believes that our sublogos chose this body form for the third density because of the opposable thumb. And the opposable thumb, what that leads to, it leads to grasping, which leads to riding, which then leads to tool making, which then leads to eventually, spoken language, and then eventually, as we see in our history, war. And so Ross speculates that our sub-logos wanted this vehicle or favored this vehicle for the opposable thumb in order to provide a more intensive experience for all the entities going through third density in its system. So for instance, we have written in vocal language, whereas telepathic language seems to be the standard in the universe. We have written in spoken language, and so did all the other planets that had their density life. And that provides a more intense experience because if you have a written system of language and you vocally speak it, then that is a more intensive experience and a totally different experiences versus just telepathic contact. A common thing that we've seen throughout the history of our solar system is bellicosity and war. And we're going to get to that as we go through the planets. And the last thing is we all share the same archetypal mind. So our sublogos, our sun, in creating our solar system, chose 22 archetypes. And so every entity that has evolved in any of the planets in our solar system have all been influenced by this archetypal mind. Alrighty, so first up, we have the planet Venus. Its core vibration is currently sixth density, and it is the only other planet other from Earth that right now that hosts life. It is currently inhabited by fifth density entities. We know that its third density is not hospitable to life, but Ross says that its fifth density is very conducive to learning, and it attracts entities from all over who go to Venus, fifth density entities who go to Venus to learn the lessons of wisdom. Their average population during their third density was 38.5 million. And at the end of their third density harvest, their harvest was 6.5 million. So Ra is comprised of 6.5 million souls. So if you can imagine during their third density and their population being 38.5 million, Venus is roughly almost the exact same size as Earth. And 38.5 million is roughly the population of California. So just imagine Earth with only the population of California. That's pretty much what they were dealing with. And as we know, this is Ra's home planet, and it was one of the earliest in our solar system to host intelligent life and advance through the densities. Ross says that their third density concluded 2.6 billion years ago, which coincided with Earth's second density beginning. So if you were an entity in Ross' third density on Venus and were to turn a telescope to the Earth, then Earth would have been a barren, probably violent planet at that time. There wouldn't have been any life on it yet. It wouldn't have looked as beautiful as it does now. There would have been water, but it may not have been blue. There was probably a lot of, magma, volcanic activity, all of that thing going on as the transition from first to second density. Ross says that Venus was a harshly bright planet and that they lived under conditions that we would consider to be difficult. My speculation, based off my astronomical knowledge, would be Venus is obviously closer to the sun, more exposure to radiation, so that may have had played a part in the harsher environment as well as Venus's rotation. The physical appearance, which is one of my favorite parts, Ross says we were golden. We were tall and somewhat delicate. Our physical body complex covering, which you call the integument or skin, had a golden luster. And this is the form that they chose to appear to the Egyptians in when they chose to materialize and teach them the law of one. They enjoyed a slightly thinner veil, and so this allowed for them to have more of a sort of rapid evolution and more successful harvest throughout their density experiences. Ross says that on Venus, they were a more harmonious and philosophical society. They also developed the tarot. Ross says the third density experience of those of Venus dealt far more deeply and harmoniously with what you would call relationships with other selves, sexual energy transfer work, and philosophical or metaphysical research. The product of many, many generations of work upon what we conceive to be the archetypical mind produced the tarot, which was used by our peoples as a training aid in developing the magical personality. So these people were all about spiritual evolution, sex, philosophy, and really growing themselves and maturing themselves and growing spiritually. They were much more harmonious and loving than we are here in our current society. Rob brings up a interesting story that kind of it's an irony against the backdrop of a planet who had a very harmonious society. So Ross says that there were two fifth density positive wanderers who incarnated on Venus and ended up flipping their polarity to the negative. And how this happened was that Venus being a very harmonious society, there were a portion of the population who felt like, this love and this harmony was kind of passive or was sickening. And so they wanted a more wisdom-based approach to the harvest. And so two fifth density wanderers, one male, one female, being the density of wisdom, they heard this call and they chose to answer it. They had the intentions of incarnating into Venus's third density and providing a wisdom-based approach to, manifesting the love needed to graduate to the harvest. They had purely positive intentions, but as we know, when you incarnate their density, there's the veil and you completely just forget your mission. So what Ross says happened is one of them, they began their work and then the other one found them. They incarnated as male and female. And as a pair, they kind of started a philosophy or a distortion that caused a lot of negativity in the society that the society was not used to. So pretty much they were, it almost sounds kind of cult. Like Ross says that they pushed people to slaughter, they used domination over others, and all this in the name of wisdom. And so Ross says that this was very unlikely on the planet Venus. They were not used to slaughter. So because these two wanderers came and pretty much were doing these horrendous acts that the planet had never seen before, they were able to easily flip their polarity to the negative. Now, Ross says that once they passed on from that incarnation and found themselves in negative fourth density time space, of course, they were startled. They kind of had to do a little backtracking, and they eventually flipped their polarity back to the positive and then joined Ra's social memory complex later on. But I thought that was an interesting story that Ra would share with us. Like I said, against the backdrop of a harmonious society, you can still have these sorts of things happen. Ross says that, because they were a harmonious society, the fourth density was pretty much a breeze through the fourth density, which is the density of love and understanding. That says this caused a little bit difficulty in the fifth density because they had such a harmonious and easy third and fourth density experience. They had a little more work to do in the fifth density with balancing all of that, the overabundance of love with wisdom. Ra is currently in the sixth density, and they say they have about 2.5 million years left of that density, which on the scale of 75 million years, which is how long sixth density is, that is pretty much a blip. They don't have much longer at all. Alrighty, so this brings me to our next planet, which is Maldek. Ross says the peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to you as Atlantis, in that it gained much technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their sphere. So Maldek was the fifth planet from the sun, and it currently exists as the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Astronomers will tell you, oh, the asteroid belt is leftover remnants from the formation of our solar system. We'll come to find out is actually the remains of a planet that imploded. Ross says that the cycles on this planet started early due to Maldek being able to host first density life forms early on. The society that existed in Maldek's third density had service to self thoughts, ideas, and actions, but they sincerely believed them to be positive and service to others. And Dawn asked Ra if Maldek had not destroyed themselves and if their third density was to conclude, would their harvest then have been negative? And Ra said that kind of like ours, it would have more than likely been it would have been a mixed harvest. So it's destruction, which is the really interesting part. And I believe this comes from a quote channeling that we got just a few years ago. So this is more recent information. So the destruction of the planet happened through the use of scientific and spiritual knowledge along with nuclear and crystal powered weapons. This occurred 705,000 years ago. And so the questioner asked, quote, was this intentional? Was this an accident? Or was this just a byproduct of war? Quo says the type of what has been described as weaponry, while we may not explore this in a technological sense, may better be viewed as an exploration and a study of the inner workings of the planet itself and how a population upon a planet's surface may influence the very dynamic, meaningful, and living processes beneath the surface of the planet, extending down deep to its very core. This was both a technological and spiritual understanding that was gained that then allowed for the destruction of the planet itself. And the tendencies towards that suicidal notion were very much in the inception of the destruction. So pretty much there was a person or a group of people who consciously decided to pretty much just end everything and destroy the entire planet. And you can imagine how traumatic that was, and that the entire population of the entire planet they were so traumatized that they were collectively caught in a tangle or knot of fear. Ross says that some of your time passed, no one could reach them, no beings could aid them. Not a single soul escaped this cataclysm. And so just imagine the trauma that that would cause. You're going about your daily life, then all of a sudden the ground starts trembling, and the next thing you know it, you're dead. You're in time space. You've had no peaceful transition. You have no idea what's happening because just a minute ago you were living and breathing third density air, and then now all of a sudden you're caught dead in a totally different environment with probably a whole bunch of other souls, kind of screaming and crying out. And so Ra called this a tangle or a knot of fear. So 600,000 years ago, about 100,000 years after the destruction of the planet, the Confederation deployed a social memory complex to untie the knot of fear. These entities started regaining consciousness, started remembering that they were conscious, and they were brought to the inner planes of our planet 500,000 years ago. As part of their karmic alleviation, the alleviation mechanism was designed by the placement of this consciousness in second dimensional physical chemical complexes, which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the workings of the third density distortions of the mind complex. So pretty much what happened is after the Confederation was able to pretty much wake up the population of Maldek from their knot of fear, they were able to come to consciousness and realize what they had done to their planet, how they had destroyed it. And so, as restitution for what they had done, they decided to put their third density consciousnesses in a second density vehicle that would not allow them to be violent, that would not allow them to enact out these patterns of destruction. And so they collectively agreed to inhabit these forms, which we would know as Bigfoot. Ra tells us that there are three different types of Bigfoot. One of these species of Bigfoot are these entities. Ross says that these Bigfoot entities dwell in our deeper underground passageways, and some joined the Earth's third density, and then many, as they came to, balancing out their karma, they chose to go elsewhere and reincarnate. Some of them reincarnated and attempted at a second chance to use nuclear power responsibly. So some of the players involved in the Manhattan Project with the development of the nuclear bomb, some of those men, some of those people were reincarnated from Maldek. That was their second chance, their attempt at a restitution to use nuclear power responsibly because they had used it destructively on their previous planet. All right, next we have Mars. Its core vibration currently is mid third density. Ross says that it was stopped and it is currently undergoing healing. Mars was home to a fiery and progressive bellicose society. It had factions and practiced forms of government that warred against each other, resulting in Mars becoming inhospitable to third density life. And that sounds very, very, very familiar to what we're seeing here. Crow says that we can say that the bellicose attitudes and the intention of aggression and harm between various populations on the planet of Mars led to a scenario in which there was a gradual decline in the biosphere due to literal destruction of ecosystems. This gradual decline was exacerbated as energies escalated and weaponry and attitudes became far more destructive in nature as the desire for destruction grew. Thus, you may see a slow decline of both ecosystem and population for a matter of time that eventually concluded with a singular event that spawned a much quicker decline. That being what you would experience as a matter of months, because of weaponry that disrupted a central aspect of the planetary ecosystem, being that life-giving force of water and the cycle of water. So the Martians had some technological weaponry that disrupted the planet's water cycle. And although their decline was gradual, this singular event pretty much was the nail in the coffin. And within a matter of months, Mars was no longer hospitable to life. Through this disruption of the cycle of water, there was a chain of events that unfolded in which the ecosystem itself deteriorated, and the soul of the planet, as you may understand it, faded, thus resulting in a deterioration of what you would recognize as a magnetosphere, thus solidifying the lack of ability of life to again take grasp upon this planet. We reiterate that this catalyst of destruction is continuing to be processed and explode upon your own planet and within your own population. And you may draw correlations between what you witness upon your planet currently and its relationship to the planet as an ecosystem and what unfolded upon the red planet. So, I mean, just seeing the news every day and seeing them, our weaponry is advancing. It is getting more technologically advanced. I'm seeing, they're destroying ecosystems, their populations are decreased. Pretty much what happened on Mars, we're seeing what's happening here. And what tends to happen with these populations is they kind of get stuck in a pattern. So even though they repeat their density on another planet, their memory is wiped, they still have the habit of being bellicose. And so we're seeing that play out right now. Everything that we're seeing in the Middle East, that dates all the way back to Mars. These people have been at each other's throats since Mars, and just for some reason, a lot of them have not snapped out of that aggressive and bellicose pattern of action. Now, Ross says a lot of the Martians have successfully made harvest, have graduated positively to the fourth density. They have, made restitution for their mistakes on. You still have a good portion of the original Martian population that is still here, still trying to figure it out. And as I look to the news and a lot of the world's leaders, I see people who more than likely were players in these previous societies who, like I said, are stuck in that bellicose pattern and are more than likely going to have to repeat third density again. And who's to say if, they'll continue to take their bellicose actions to their new third density. Alrighty, we have Earth. Now, this deserves a presentation all on its own, but I'm just going to give a few points, a brief overview. So, Earth is currently a fourth density planet, and it is inhabited by both third and fourth density entities. Population 8 billion. Harvest, we currently don't know what that will be. Earth's third density ended during the winter solstice of 2012 and officially became a fourth density planet. Earth is comprised of 16 planetary influences or civilizations who repeated their density here. So pretty much our society, our planet, there are 16 other planets who had to repeat the third density, whether that be through actions of their own, such as Mars and Maldek, or you have an instance where I believe it was Ra or Quo. There was a group of people from a planet in a distant solar system who incarnated into the Asian population. It became, the ancient Chinese people. They had to repeat their density on Earth because their planet could no longer host their density life due to the age of their star. The star made it difficult for the planet to host their density life. So they had to come here to continue that. And so you have 16 different planetary people here for different reasons. And this is what is the cause of the array of our cultures as well as the array of a catalyst. This is not common. So Earth is unique in the fact that there are so many different cooks in the kitchen. There are so many different types of people in one place on one planet. It's almost like putting a whole bunch of different kids from a whole bunch of different neighborhoods in one classroom. You can only imagine how that's going to turn out. And that's pretty much what we have here. So the Martians transferred by Yahweh and the genetic altering of our bodies. So when the Martians destroyed their third density ability to host, third density life, around that time, Earth was luckily coming into its third density. And so Earth was freshly available for these Martians to come here and restart the third density in order to make harvest. And so Yahweh is a guardian. We talked about this the other week in Doug's presentation. And I want to do a bigger presentation on them because this topic is really vast. But just for, a brief overview, Yahweh is a guardian, one of the 24 guardians of the earth. They are a higher dimensional social memory complex. They are essentially almost like God-like being that has a responsibility of looking over, they have custodianship over the earth and looking out over our free will. And so when the Martians were needing another planet to continue their density on, Earth was available. And so Yahweh enabled them to be transferred here to Earth so that the Martians could reincarnate on Earth and restart their density. Now, Yahweh favored these entities and wanted to provide a better body for them to incarnate into. Because Ross says that at the beginning of third density entities, our bodies evolved from the great ape. Those bodies still had a lot of hair and were still kind of leaning towards, walking or crawling on all fours versus being upright. So what Yahweh did is that they genetically altered the body of the Homo sapien, and by articulating facial features a bit more carefully, by altering the set of the body so it would be able to stand upright, and by improving the dexterity of the physical vehicle, especially in the hands, and by creating a larger capacity within the mind that came with that biological species. In essence, they created a new and improved great ape body, which looked a good deal like the one you and I are enjoying. So pretty much Ra brought in these Martians. Okay, they have to restart their density, but we want to provide for them a better body than what they had on Mars so that they can better learn the lessons of love in order for them to continue on in their evolution. This was seen as an infringement on their free will from the view of the other guardians, because Yahweh literally let us make man in our image. This scripture is directly referencing the genetic intervention that Yahweh made. And so, from the viewpoint of the other guardians, they felt like this was an infringement on the free will of the Martians because now they had their social complex had pretty much melded with this much higher social complex, and they were given these better bodies. And so, because of this, the other guardians felt like the free will's been infringed on, and so now there's this pride that's going to exist. And so the quarantine was instituted, which pretty much is a shield to keep. So pretty much any extraterrestrial entity has to pretty much answer to the guardians before they can land. No entity can just come in our skies and just land on Earth and do what they please. They have to pretty much seek permission, and they are stopped by the guardians. And that was instituted because of Yahweh's genetic, their genetic altering to the great eight bodies. And then thousands and thousands of years later, because there was this pride and these people felt like they were better than, this allowed for the Orion Empire, which is the service itself, to kind of make inroads. And so Yahweh wanted to raise up a new breed, I guess you can say, to combat the Orion Empire. And this is the story we get from the Bible of the Watchers, or of the angels, the sons of God coming to earth and mating with women. That was Yahweh. They came to earth, took incarnate form, and mated with the women in order to raise up better and bigger beings that could spread the law of one and combat these negative entities. And the offspring of this union were giants. And so, but unfortunately, Orion was able to pretty much co-opt them as well. And hey, you're bigger, you're better, do evil things instead of good. And so that's kind of what happened. The lifespan at the beginning of third density was 900 years, which is actually the average for third density life forms. And our our lifespans have dramatically decreased since then. The Confederation has made contact in which was a landmass in the Pacific that existed that sunk. And this was prior to Atlantis. The Confederation made contact in Atlantis. Ra landed in Egypt, and there was another group that also made contact in South America. So we are currently transitioning into the fourth density. It is a spectrum. When Ra was asked in the 80s how long this transition would take, Ra gave an estimate of anywhere between 100 and 700 years. So there's no telling when we're going to be when the space-time continuum is going to match fully with the fourth density time-space continuum. All of our previous harvests, so there are within a 75,000 year cycle in the third density, there are three minor cycles. The first two, there were no harvest, which kind of raised a concern for the Confederation because there's usually supposed to be harvest at each 25,000 year interval, but on this planet, there was not. And so at the end of our harvest, since we're at the end of third density, our harvest quota is going to be a lot smaller than the Earth can comfortably host. And so a lot of our fourth density population is going to come from elsewhere. All right, next we have Uranus as a honorable mention. And its core vibration is first density. Ross says the planetary entity known to you as Uranus is slowly moving through the first density and has the potential of moving through all the densities. So pretty much Ross is telling us that Uranus is the next planet in line that could potentially host intelligent life in the future. Now that sounds crazy to us, considering the state of Uranus right now. But like I said earlier, think about raw. When they were in their third density 2.5 billion years ago, Earth had no life on it. It was a barren planet. It was a violent planet. And so in a couple billion years, based off my own astronomical knowledge, my own assumptions, as the sun gets older, it's going to expand and and the outer planets are going to warm up. So I believe that as that happens, as Uranus warms up and receives more heat from the sun, that's really going to kind of initiate and really kickstart its ability to host life. So that'll be an interesting development if any of us are around in a couple billion years to see. And then another planet that gets honorable mention is Saturn. This is where the Council of Saturn sits. And it is the planet known as Saturn has a great affinity for the infinite intelligence, and thus it has been dwelled upon in its magnetic fields of time-space by those who wish to protect your system. So I like to call Saturn sort of the HQ of the Confederation. Although Saturn has not hosted third density life, it, like Ross said, it is a conscious planet. It has a huge affinity for the creator. And so because of that, it is dwelled upon in its metaphysical planes by entities from all over. And as we know, the Council of Nine, which kind of runs the entire Confederation, they are located in the eight densities in what Ra calls the ring area. So in the area of the rings is where the Council of Saturn resides. And that is all I have. Does anybody have any questions or anything? I know this was a lot, Margaret. I know this is your first meeting, so you're kind of like, what did I get into? What has Doug invited me to? But I wanted to kind of revisit this. I know there's some people in this who may not have been here for this original presentation, or who may be new to the Law of One and may not have, come across the history of our solar system. So, does anybody want to have any questions, any discussions?
Well, DeMarcus, this was one of my favorite presentations because I've always been fascinated with the bellicose nature of humanity since recorded time. I mean, it's gone unchanged. And I found in reading, when I was reading about the planets and their destruction, that also too was something that was very interesting for me to read about, and I remembered it. And then you did a presentation, and this ties in so nicely to what Doug was talking about last week, and I think intends possibly he's going to do a round two on it. So I was thinking when I heard you were going to present that, I said, oh, I hope it's going to be about the planets, um, and what happened to them, because a lot of the members are new since then, and it's very interesting to read about it and hear about it. So thank you as always. I love your presentations and your knowledge. So no questions or anything, but just glad you did it and we're sharing it with others.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah. It's a wonderful presentation. Wonderful. I just have this sense of infinity and so much more to be discovered. Um, so I really did enjoy your presentation very much.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really well explained. Thank you. I do have some questions. I have not read The Law of One. I'm learning from being part of this group, so I am not as well versed as the other members. But can you explain a little bit about what the harvest is? I kind of can guess, but I'd like to hear it explained, please.
Yes. So our universe is divided into seven densities, which are seven levels of consciousness. Another word with that would be dimensions. And so these are our levels of evolution that all units of consciousness evolve through, starting with the first density, which is the elements, fire, earth, air, water, onto the second density, which is microbial life on the lower end, all the way to plant and animal life on the higher end. And then you get into third density, which is the density of self-consciousness. It's the first density where entities are conscious of themselves. And then this is the density of what's called the choice, where entities choose to either serve the self or choose to serve others. And both of these paths are um, uh, are pretty much equal to the creator, and everyone has the choice to make which decision they want to go. And then you have the fourth density, which is the density of love and understanding. You have the fifth density, which is the density of wisdom. The sixth density is the density of balance, which is balancing the wisdom you learned in fifth density with the love you learned in fourth density. And then the seventh density is what Ra calls the gateway density. It's pretty much where you give up all of your personal identity, you strip yourself of all of that, and you pretty much start to absorb and become one with the creator again. And at the end of seventh density, you'll coalesce and become one with the creator. And so what harvest is, there is a harvest between each of these densities, so sort of like a graduation. And so within the third density, in order to go on to fourth density, each density is a vibrational spectrum. Okay, and so fourth density, in order for an entity to withstand the vibrations in the light and the intensity that the fourth density environment is, they have to either, one, if the service to others, have to make a grade of 51% in being service to others, meaning that at least just 1% over half of the time, your thoughts, your actions, and most importantly, your intentions are in consideration in service of other selves, you then are eligible to graduate and be harvested to the positive fourth density. On the other side of the spectrum, if you serve the self 95% of the time, if your intentions are self-serving 95% of the times, then that makes you eligible to be harvested to the fourth density negative path. And so pretty
Mm.
much what that means is, like I said, they're all vibrational spectrums. And so being 51% service to others puts the spirit, that puts the person at a vibrational level in order to withstand fourth density vibrations, if that makes any sense. And so the harvest from third density is on the individual. Since we are currently in harvest, when every single one of us dies, we're all going to walk what's called the steps of light, which each density's light is providing. And wherever we stop, we're going to continue walking until the light becomes too glaring, until it becomes too uncomfortable. And wherever we stop at is what's the density we're going to continue on to. Some people, when they stop walking and they look down and see where they are, they're going to realize they've crossed into the fourth density light. They can withstand fourth density vibrations. A lot of people are going to have to repeat the third density. And so harvest in the third density is on the individual, harvest into the fifth density is on the social memory complex. Does that answer your question? I was kind of long-winded, but
Yes, makes me think of more questions, but yes, it did. Very interesting, especially about service to others and how that ties into Christianity, which is yeah, or basic religious kind of thought. But we're not all getting to the fourth density at the same time, right? I mean,
right.
and then there's a dark density, a dark fourth and a light fourth that people will either go into.
Correct. So there are planets. So the third density is the only density where both polarities coexist on one planet. In the fourth density, you have planets that are solely dedicated to learning and advancing in service to self. And then you have planets that are totally, wholly dedicated to the positive and advancing fourth density in service to others. Earth is a positive fourth density planet. Okay. So at the end of its third density, it will be inhabited only by all positive fourth density entities. Those who die and make negative graduation will go to another planet elsewhere who is solely dedicated to self-service.
And DeMarcus, I know there was a percentage given on the negative, the service to self.
Yes.
What was that?
So 51% service to others allows you to be eligible, makes you harvestable to the fourth density positive.
Right.
95% service to self makes
Mm-hmm.
you eligible to be harvestable to the negative fourth density.
Right.
And Ross says they're both as equally hard as hard to consider, others over half the time as it is to be almost completely self-serving.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I also found. I remembered it being something like that, and I found that also fascinating, those percentages.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because the majority of people end up in what's called the sinkhole of indifference, which is pretty much that group in between. So so when everyone dies, not everyone will make graduation. A lot of people will have to repeat the third density on another planet. And Ra calls that the sinkhole of indifference. So you have people that will graduate and be harvested to the fourth density, either positive or negative. And then you have those who don't become harvestable. So maybe, they die and they made the 48% service to others. That's going to be the majority of the population, and they're going to repeat their density elsewhere. And that seems to be the standard across the universe. Even if you look at Ra's planet, their average population was 38.5 million, but only 6.5 million made harvest. That's not
Yeah.
even a fifth. So even in a society that was very overwhelmingly loving and harmonious, they still had a very small percentage that actually made harvest at the end of the third density.
Wow.
DeMarcus is the harvest into this fourth density. Is this of human beings that are alive on the earth, or are some harvestable but are going to reincarnate, or and I'm just really curious about the transitional aspect. So of 2012, the Earth said started its fourth density transition. I mean, sometimes I think of the Earth as this planet. Is the planet, if we can exclude it from human activity, is it ahead of the human consciousness? I don't know. I kind of wonder what the transition like. I sometimes follow a guy named Richard Rudd who created these gene keys from the I Ching, and he had 1987 was the harmonic convergence, and then 2012 was a melodic resonance, and in 2027 a rhythmic symphony. And he sees all of these as increases in, resonances with higher light and love and such. And so many channelings out there, talk about how the possibility of Earth, I think, and human beings graduating, if you will, seem to change a lot in the last, I don't know, 40 or 50 years, the possibility, the higher opportunities for this. So I'm just curious about transition and if we're in the middle of it, and any more you could say about that.
No, that's a very great question, and that is something that's confusing because it's like Rod tells us, oh, the 2012 was for density, and like, okay, well, where is it? So what happened is for Earth is for density times space, which is the invisible metaphysical environment, and it is currently birthing that for density environment. However, its space-time physical environment that we all experience is behind. It's still third density. It's catching up to the fourth density. And so fourth density is a spectrum. And so on the metaphysical side, that means that all of the particles of light, all of the atoms that make up everything, they're starting to vibrate a lot quicker. And so our physical environment is starting to change. We can't really see it yet, but it's definitely something you can feel. And so with fourth density being the density of love and understanding, a lot of those themes really start to take anchor in society. So you have a lot of children being born that are challenging the norms. You have a lot of old institutions that are, especially service itself, collapsing. You have a lot of people that are being forced to go inside because in the fourth density, there is no, you can't hide from yourself. You can't hide from other people. It's just open and free. So you have a lot of people being faced with dealing with their inner traumas, and you have a lot of these old third density things that are crumbling and that are fading away, and they have to in order for fourth density to come. So in time space, Earth is fourth density, but its space time physical plane is catching up to that. And that's going to take a process of centuries. And so Rod tells us that fourth density entities, they're not able to shield themselves to make themselves invisible yet to third densities. The entities are only able to do that later on in fourth density. So fourth density entities will not walk the same physical earth we do until the very last third density entity dies. But until that happens, those who are dying and are making graduation to the fourth density and are choosing to reincarnate into the fourth density, they're reincarnating into Earth's fourth density time space and are beginning their work. Now, to confuse you even more, there are people who have made graduation on other planets outside of our solar system. So they've successfully made harvest to the fourth density, but instead of going on to their planet's native fourth density, they have been given the opportunity and have chosen to come to Earth to incarnate into Earth's third density to help usher in the fourth density. So you have people being born here who are both third and fourth density. Ra calls them dually activated entities.
Well,
And
are those
so,
planets from other solar systems? The
correct,
ones?
yeah.
Okay.
So you have, that explains the younger generations being a lot different, being, more socially justice, meaning being more progressive. These are entities who are incarnating from elsewhere who have chosen to help usher in the fourth density. And so these entities, Ra says, what's going to happen is these dually activated entities, they're going to meet, have babies who have babies who have babies. Over this course of time, the physical body is going to evolve into the fourth density body, which is a much lighter body. It's not as heavily chemical like ours is. It's much easier to heal. It's much more connected to the mind. But like I said, this spectrum is going to take time. And so even though our physical environments don't necessarily reflect for yet, what we see happening around physically, politically, socially, all of those things are happening because of fourth density light. So we're seeing political structures and services substructures crumble. We're seeing a lot of physical earth changes happening because of our bellicosity from centuries and from thousands of years of humans warring against each other. This has created a sort of metaphysical heat that has been pushed down into the earth. And so the earth, as she is birthing the fourth density, has to release this heat and is choosing to release it in the way of like natural events and natural disasters. So the increase of hurricanes, the super El Nino, these wildfires, all of these physical, natural environmental happenings are happening because the earth is trying to release this negative heat and readjust itself in order to accept fourth density positive light.
Mhm.
Wow.
Make room for it.
Right. And so it's unfortunately because of our bellicose, past the transition is going to be rough we're seeing it right now. We're living through it. It's going to be a little rough. Who knows where it's going to end up? Who knows how, the last third density entity, will be standing. But at the end, when it's all said and done, Earth will successfully have transitioned into a positive fourth density planet.
Yeah, I once had kind of a vision, in terms of spirituality, like the old heating elements on a stove that were a circular,
Mhm.
flat
Hmm.
element, and in this kind of moment, it was like seeing that creating heat because that metal resists electricity, so it creates heat. And if you made that element out of copper, which doesn't have the resistance, you wouldn't get heat. But I was feeling like in my heart and soul that as love and light were increasing, any parts or aspects of me that weren't as conductive that needed cleansing are going to heat up.
Hmm.
And you kind of understand the alchemical like understanding of the dross being separated from the gold. And so that's kind of the way I have it contextually, is that as this elevates, the parts of ourselves that need elevated cleansing, if you will, are going to have the resistance and the heat even in our earth. So it kind of either burns us up or else we elevate with it. One of the two is kind of how I.
That is exactly what's happening on the planetary level. That's great.
Great, except it's not so. It's not, very painful in many, many places and areas. Yeah, it's kind of such a mixed to hold. To try and hold it is really, really hard, I think. Um,
Oh yes, most definitely. And it's interesting because we're actually lucky that the Earth is choosing to release the heat this way, because there was a quote channeling that said that towards the end of the 20th century, towards at the late 90s, the Earth was actually supposed to flip its poles, and that would have wiped us out.
yeah,
Mhm.
But there was intervention from higher sources, the Confederation, and the Earth ultimately chose to release its heat through what we're seeing now, through these, an increase in natural disasters and rupturing of its outer garment. So we're lucky, we're blessed that the Earth chose to release the heat this way versus just completely take us out.
yeah.
I wonder what percentage of the Earth's population is service to others. And then I'm thinking, what percent of the population is just totally unaware, completely? Uh,
So that's actually a really good question, because what determines, when 2012 came, what determined if Earth was a positive, would be a fourth density positive or negative planet? What determined that? What determined that was when the winter solstice came on 2012, and the moment came for Earth to transition to fourth density, there were more people who were harvestable to the positive polarity currently living than there were to the negative polarity. And because of
that's
that,
that,
because of that, because there were more people who were harvestable to the positive sense, that thus determined Earth to be a positive for density planet. Now, the polarities, the service to self is a very, very, very small percentage. That is a
And
very hard path to hone. It's a very hard path to
yeah.
master. And we see a lot of service to self entities on our main stage, their positions, the home of service to self entities are places of power and influence. And so
Mm-hmm.
we see this in our governments, at the
Right.
top of our societies, even the people who are
Right.
running, behind the scenes, a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
billionaires and
Right.
oligarchs, a lot of them are service to self. And
Yeah.
Raw also said that there would be a sharp increase in those who would be negatively harvestable towards the end of harvest.
Right. I just
And
know in those years of 2012, really more 2013, I think Doug talked about the same year for him too. Personal shifts. There, my life just totally started changing. Um, and I was just like catapulted down this path. And I've heard Doug talk about the same thing and right about the same timing. But I always kind of gave the service to self. I always said, oh, about 10%.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot smaller group, but the
Hmm.
majority of people will have to repeat their density.
Yeah,
The majority of Earth's 8 billion people are going to have to repeat their density elsewhere. They're going to have to start
right.
all over again from scratch.
And I don't know that that's because there were services. It's just, I think it's just an awareness, kind of like walking through life unaware. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but
So polarity is based off intention. So
okay. Well,
you know, the majority of people will never, ever, ever hear of the harvest. They will never, ever read the law of one,
right,
and you
right,
don't have to, you can be completely unaware of these things. As long as you go through life, you lived your life and your intentions were good
right. Okay.
more
Yeah.
than half of the time, then you will die and
Okay.
you will be
Mm-hmm.
harvestable. So polarity is based off intention.
Right. And influence, because I remember in my quite a few years of my life, just really being influenced by the darkness,
Right.
the definitely negative. Yeah.
And I mean, per the percentages, no one person is going to be 100% service to others. It's only required that you be 51%. So you have people
Right.
who are going to be 49% service to
Yay.
self.
I think I can at least make the 51%.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So at least just half the time. So
Yeah.
we have a question that says the soul has to age and experience to be able to reach this though. Correct. So yeah, so
Yes.
third density is 75,000 years, and so each soul is given that amount of time. A lot of souls don't come to the point of harvestability within the 75,000 years, so they have to repeat third density.
Wow. Wow.
But it's nothing to be
Hey,
afraid of.
DeMarcus, I just wanted to say, I hopped in a little late, but it was a great presentation, and I missed, I guess, the parts that you had to say on Yahweh. But like, if you could give a presentation on that, because I've been asking Doug about some of that stuff, and
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
so I definitely want to do a presentation on Yahweh because I've been really deep in study the last couple of years on Yahweh. Yahweh is a very vast topic, a very vast subject,
Hmm.
and it is directly influencing what we are seeing today.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, Yahweh is a guardian entity. They genetically interfered, and this allowed people to feel better than, allowed Orion. I said in our last meeting that at Sinai, Moses, it was the Orion Empire who posed as God that Moses met at Sinai, and that is a whole story within itself. So yes, I definitely want to do a presentation on them and give
Hmm.
them justice
just a
because
quick question on that, because I think that's what I was misunderstanding. So, was that entity Yahweh, or was that like a false, a different entity?
so it was a Confederation positive entity named Yahweh that was the original entity that, like I said, genetically intervened and were guiding the Hebrew people and leading them in the positive way. But because of their genetic interventions and these people believing that they were better than others, this created thought patterns that allowed for the negative service to self empire to come in and co-opt and hijack the name of Yahweh. And so that's where you kind of see the turn in the Old Testament towards from a very positive and loving God to a more aggressive and fiery law-giving God. And so I'll definitely do a presentation on that.
That's very clarifying. Thank you. That answer in itself, that was like, wow, okay. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you all for the questions. I'll go ahead and close this out. If everyone can close their eyes. Infinite Creator, thank you for this time. Thank you for this night. Thank you for this discussion. I ask that everyone was touched tonight and learned something. Definitely learn, teach as I have learned. I pray that everyone walks away from here tonight with having learned something, with better curiosity to your mystery and to better know you. I ask that you continue to watch over us and to guide us as we all go our separate ways through this incarnation. And if everyone can repeat after me, I am
I
I
am
am
the infinite creator
the
the
infinite
infinite
creator,
creator
manifested into flesh.
manifested into flesh.
flesh.
I am
I
I am
infinity
infinity,
experiencing itself.
experiencing
experiencing
itself.
itself.
Amen. Thank you all.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, DeMarcus. You're always greatly, greatly appreciated.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy that Troy and Doug were MIA. We got you. Yay. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're a
you
real
all.
treat, a wonderful treat. Thank you
Yes.
so much. So many thoughts flowing.
Good
Yes.
night.
Pleasure.
Good
Bye.
night,
Good
you
night.
all.
Good night.
Yeah, people were there.
I couldn't tell. I
Is
couldn't.
this a large group?
Wait just a second.
How did you find out about him?
Let me make sure that I've left it. I can't tell if I have.